Hello. I'm so glad to be here with Aimee today. I'm DC. I'm an MLM dropout, and we're gonna have hopefully a really good conversation today. If you're new to my channel, I'm DC, and then Aimee, if you want to introduce yourself to the peeps over on my channel, that'd be great.
Yeah, so I'm Aimee Ure, and I have dropped out of multiple MLMs, finally learned my lesson, and I'm now trying to kind of rectify some of the damage that I did and that was done to me, I guess, during MLM time.
Yeah, and I think it's such a having to unlearn, like, you take some things with you, but then you have to unlearn. Hi, Jennifer. You have to unlearn some stuff, and it's quite. I just ended my tenure in a Young Living on in April, so I'm a little bit. It's still like freshly, like, wounds are still healing, and it's like, oh man, this is so rough to like leave a nice warm little fuzzy toxic community, and then and then you come out into the real world and you're like, oh, it's not so scary and bad
Right.
here.
And people, wait, I have more people that are supporting me out here than I did in there because up in there I was only making the money, and out here we're just supporting each other to support each other.
Yeah.
It's a very refreshing difference once you find it.
Yeah, and it's also nice to not feel like you're stepping on people's toes for asking questions, or that someone's going to say like, "Oh, you don't need to look at that," or "You don't need to search for that," or whatever. And here it's like, "Oh yeah, let me send you the link. Let me show you where I found this information. Let me show you what sources I'm using, and hey, let me know if you disagree." And there's like it doesn't feel like a Thunderdome. Sometimes it is, but it does feel like there's at least there's an opportunity for conversation here, and there seemed to be less of a opportunity for conversation
Hmm.
back in the MLM. So
Oh yeah, absolutely.
hi,
Hey.
welcome. So today we are going to it's it's a little bit of like a full question, but I was really thinking about how me being like a rule follower as a kid and kind of focusing on, and the weird thing is my parents weren't like, be obedient. They weren't like that. I naturally was a compliant rule loving kid, and that really, I think they tried to help me not be that way, but there's some things, because they're both very independent and strong and like can stand on their own. I think maybe they weren't aware to like of what questions to help me work through, and it
Mhm.
set me up for like, oh crap, it didn't they didn't set me up, but it was just one of those things where like we know now, and I think maybe having this conversation will help either other parents maybe talk to their kids a little bit differently about how they can be empowered to prevent some of the stuff that I went through. And there's no trigger warnings here from my situation. I don't know about Aimee when she talked about her stuff, but I think it's just, I think knowledge is empowering at its nature, and like the more knowledge people have, the better that they can handle their situations. So that's what we're going to be talking about a little bit. And Aimee, what is your understanding of what I spewed on Instagram the other day?
No, it like as you were talking, it just hit so home to me, not only in how I was raised and how it impacted me. And I'm the exact same as you. Like it wasn't that my mom was saying I needed to be super compliant. It was much more that that's how I am. And as I now parent, I've discovered some of those things. So I will
Mm,
add like a mental health trigger.
yeah.
Um, and if we get up into any other triggers, I'll add them. But knowledge is power, and there are so many things, even within the last 2 years, I guess, that I have learned as a parent that I wish I had known a long time ago. Um, because there is no rule manual. Like they don't tell you how to raise these kids. They just like, congratulations, take it home and keep it alive and make sure it can function. And that's hard to do some days.
Oh yeah, for sure. I have 2 brothers and 2 sisters, and we definitely put my parents through the ringer
Mhm.
for sure. So it's a very dynamic situation, and on the best of days, like, you realize, like, I'm a fully functional adult and, like, we're good. And I would characterize that I had a really great childhood, and I think now, and I think my parents would say, like, I wish we would have known to ask these or have more conversations to help you be more empowered. And then how it kind of trickled over in my time in an MLM, and what that really, like, it was a ditch, I guess, as you know. So I guess to start off, and Aimee, this is the first question I'm going to ask you,
Okay.
because maybe and I guess this is my hypothetical. What I understand overall is that obedience is pushed in our society, somewhat. Now, some parents are like free range, whatever, but there is kind of this unspoken, or sometimes it's spoken, that an obedient child makes your life easier. You
Mhm.
don't have to have as many whatever. But my first question is, why do you think obedience could be bad? And maybe based on your situation or what you've experienced with your kids.
Yeah, so it's pretty interesting. I have 5 kids,
Okay.
and they range from 18 down to 8.
Okay.
Quite a span, and it was a little rough in that I actually talked to my 18-year-old and my 16-year-old, and I was like, "Can I ask you guys about this?" And they both had the exact same response. This seems like a no-win question. Like, I don't know if I want to answer this. Like, I don't think I
Yeah.
want to get. And I started laughing. And he said, "Well, let me give you some examples from me growing up and see what you think." So I kind of gave him permission.
Yeah.
Um, but I often found, for me, one of the things that was hard, I was the youngest. So I wasn't, and I'm not the typical youngest in that I felt responsible for
Mm.
everything.
Yeah.
Um, I had a single mom with 5 kids, and I felt like my responsibility was to make her life easier, and that meant to be obedient. What that often meant was sometimes sacrificing things that I needed or that I wanted in order to not rock the boat, in order
Mm.
to not, and it was nothing that she put on herself.
Yeah.
I did that.
Yeah.
And I have found that to be true of some of my children.
Mm.
So my 16-year-old has OCD, and it wasn't until they were diagnosed, which was about 2 years ago, that we realized I have it as well.
Mm.
Because for the longest time, I thought OCD was like the movie What About Bob? Washing your hands, doing things, right? Like that's what
Yeah.
we know. But there's a specific type of OCD called scrupulosity.
Okay.
And that type of OCD is worrying that you are never going to be good enough,
Mm.
worrying you can never um, do enough right things. And you are on this constant mission to prove that you are morally okay. Not even like
Mm.
great.
Yeah.
And as what I found out as a parent is by telling our 16-year-old how amazing they were, how obedient they were, like they were doing all the right things, it was reinforcing their OCD
Oh.
because we were right. And it's like, you don't know what you don't know. And we had no idea we were making their OCD worse.
Mm.
Um, but because this strict obedience, there were many things that Jace gave up that they needed.
Mm.
And because they were just such a rule follower, they wanted to do what was right. Um, it can be bad because there are some things that you should question.
Yeah.
And if you just expect just straight obedience, um, it's not fair to the kids, and you're not teaching them how to think critically.
Yeah.
Um, and so I think you hold back a lot of power and knowledge from them. And that's where it has been bad in in some of our situations.
Mm. That's, I mean, I hadn't really, and I actually didn't know the type of OCD existed. And that's very eye opening for me. And
Yeah.
wow, it's like it opens up all these things where it's like, it's great. I mean, I guess I'm a little like, not stunned, but I'm just kind of taking that all in that.
And it was interesting when we found it out. So we actually, it was one of those days I was like, hey, I have to go to the library. Will you come with me? And can we just turn on a podcast? Because there was a podcast that I like to listen to. And it just so happened that there was a girl on it talking about her OCD. And I don't know if we ever made it to the library. I don't think we did. We, like, our 30-minute outing ended up being 3 hours because we listened to this and both of us were just staring at each other and we're like, oh my gosh, like she could be describing me. She could be talking about me. And when you then have that knowledge, then you can act on it and figure things out. But like, I had no idea that existed.
Yeah. And it's so crazy, like when you are able to go and get a diagnosis, you are, again, the more knowledge you have, the more empowered you have, and the more empowered you are and you're able to help yourself, and just that growing in that awareness can like help your kids and all that stuff, and that's great.
Yeah.
I think I guess I made a lot of assumptions as a kid because my parents were great and my rules kept me safe. And I, just to give everyone an idea, like I, personality wise, I test in the like 99th percentile for neuroticism. So it's basically like just an awareness of like, if something could go wrong, I'm aware of it and I want to avoid it at all costs. So I make like a great babysitter.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but because that paired with being rules oriented and like just the like peace I have, like being obedient, I made a lot of assumptions because I had good parents that adults were all trustworthy and should be listened to. And because my dad's very smart, my mom is too. My mom's lived all over the world. My dad is just not a compliant person. So I think they weren't like, there were some conversations that I guess I needed to have because I didn't logic through them. When you're a kid, you kind of make, these assumptions about like how the world is. And so with teachers or with MLM uplines or with my coach, which that was a bad situation, there's just a lot of things that it should have been, this behavior is wrong, and I don't have to listen to an adult just because they're an adult or just because they're an authority figure or just because the behavior is the behavior is what you should judge them on, not their position. And so I know that now, being well into my adulthood, but I didn't know it then, and I didn't know it in my teens. So
Yeah, it was interesting. So just just as we were eating lunch, I actually asked my daughter, I said, did we raise you to just respect to just respect authority? And she was like, well, yeah, like whether it was church, whether it was school, like, and I said, well, okay, were there any exceptions to that? And she was like, no. Oh, wait, yes. And I said, okay, what was the exception? And she said, well, I remember we were reading a book in school and it had the N word in it. And I wouldn't say it because I knew that I didn't like that word and that word was not okay. And so I wouldn't say it. And my teacher kept getting after me and saying that I needed to read the book. And I refused. And
good.
she walked me outside and walked me to the principal's office. And I said, okay, and how did that end? She's like, you and dad told me good job. I'm like, yeah, like, no, there are things. She said, as long as something wasn't, if it was against like my morals, my ethics, and what I just believed in my core to be true, then yes, I would follow it.
Yeah.
But she knew that there was a line that she would not cross.
Yeah. And I think like in that situation, it's great. It is great. And I think like there's a lot where you get to that max point, or that where you're like, okay, I know for sure this is wrong, but there's a lot of other steps below that are wrong as well. Like for me, that were just like, oh yeah, your teacher should not be screaming at you because you didn't do good on a math test, or your coach shouldn't be, like doing all this other stuff. And I'm going to keep it like loose like that, because it's just, you don't know. And then you realize later on that that was wrong. So I guess my next question is, do you think that obedient children are less likely to stand up for themselves and are susceptible to, I'm not gonna get my channel flagged because I've already had a video removed, but getting picked on and other inappropriate things. And I didn't know what you, because that is obviously an extreme situation, but, and I've also known people who do stand up for themselves, and they were susceptible to both of these. So it's not just this, but I think it's a question, to think about, I guess.
And I would say absolutely. One of the things that I remember my mom saying as I started to have children was, you want to raise your children so that other people can like them too. Right? Like you don't want your kids to be the kids that people like, please do not bring them. Do not bring them. And so I was very aware of that. What we have found though is that a lot of kids are not raised that way, and our kids end up standing out. And because they are always, to me, I think this should be basic, using manners and asking their teacher, is there anything else I can do to help you? Or,
yeah,
we've raised them to do that, but that makes them different.
Yeah.
And I would say the majority of my children have had an issue in school with their peers. I'll say that. We'll say it that way. And it has been really, really hard. And I will also say, and I noticed someone.
Yes.
Oh, Anastasia. So, yes. We did have an issue with my oldest daughter. That she, and I think part of it was at daycare, and you mind and you do what you're supposed to.
Yep.
But it's such a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
Because you're taught to be polite. Yeah, absolutely. And that sometimes, I don't know why we think sometimes that just asking a question is rude. And that's something that MLM definitely
yes
feels in you too. Like, why would you even question? Why are you being so negative? How could you ask that question? And but as my 16-year-old was going through OCD therapy, it was like, okay, but how do we help you overcome your OCD but not become a jerk?
Yeah.
And it's this like super fine line of obedience and versus just kindness and making good choices.
Yeah.
And it's such a fine line.
Yeah, it is. And it's also something where it's everyone is different. It's going to be different for probably each kid or in each situation. And it's so complicated because people are complicated, and that's a good thing. But again, because I think sometimes in situations where you're dealing with a lot of kids, you want simplicity. So you want that, like, don't ask questions. I'm already stressed out. Like, not you, but like teachers or
I'm
church
not.
or yeah.
Absolutely.
So it's just it's my parents always encouraged questions, and when I went out into kind of the real world, that wasn't the case. So I was like, okay, an adult saying like don't ask questions, so I'm not going to. And then same thing in MLM, you get in and you're just like, no, the comp plan is simple, we're doing it like this. Well, in the fine print it says this, so what? I don't want to be telling people the wrong thing. Oh, it's way simpler to do this and it's better for them.
And you're getting bogged down in the details. Just do it.
Yeah.
It's going to work if you just do it.
Yeah. And it's like, no, the details are important.
Mm-hmm.
Questions are important. So, I wanted to highlight this. Sarah said, thank you for bringing awareness to different types of OCD. sorry, my notifications are on. People have a set idea of what it is and how it manifests can be on opposite sides of the spectrum. So important for people to know and understand.
Yeah.
And I love that you brought awareness to that, because I honestly had no idea. And I did have a perception about what OCD was, and I didn't know it could be more nuanced and affect
it's
different. Yeah.
It's crazy. When we went to therapy, so kind of a side note for OCD, we didn't know as parents, traditional talk therapy increases OCD. So we
Oh.
did what we needed to by putting our child into therapy and being like, okay, they're going to help you. It increased their OCD. And you have to have a very specific type of therapy, and it's exposure therapy. And once we started doing that, I started realizing different things like body dysmorphia is a type of OCD. All of these different things. And then it opened my eyes so much. And then to realize like, oh, all the things that I thought I did that were normal, really, no, like it's not normal to do that apparently. And it had been affecting me for years and I had no idea. Yeah.
Wow, that's, and again, you learn to live with lots of things, and then you realize like, oh, life could be different or better because I can have a tool to help this or overcome this. And my next question. Oh wait, we have a.
Oh my gosh, I love that.
If you want to read that, or if you can see, I don't know if you can see it.
It took intensive group therapy in my 30s for me to fully realize I'm a grown-ass woman. I have a brain. I am allowed to ask questions, and I do not have to unconditionally obey. Like I wish I had learned that earlier.
Yes.
It made it very valuable to me, I think, raising my kids, learning it when I did, and at least getting the question part. We worked on the OCD a little bit later, but I think that's amazing.
So do I. That's incredible. And I guess we touched on this a little bit, but to be more specific and maybe going a little bit deeper in this, more of a subcategory of obedience is that compliance. Because you can, up to a certain point, like when kids are growing, and I'm not trying to be inconsiderate or like not sensitive to this, but there's a certain thing of like, if your kid's screaming, you can just pick them up and take them out to the car. So like in compliance or whatever. But do you think compliance in children makes them easier to raise, but becomes disadvantageous in the long run?
Yes. As I was talking to my 18-year-old, she said, you guys were really, really strict when I was younger. And that then you guys started loosening up. And so that helped her feel a little bit more empowered, I think. But it does make them easier to raise because they just do what you ask. And we have a wide range of children. Our oldest two are fairly obedient. My third kind of will ask questions and like wants to have a discussion about it. She's very analytical. My fourth is just straight up rebellious. And then the youngest, he's fairly, I think he kind of resembles the third one the most. And my one, who is not compliant, is rough. And because it feels like I always have to be on my toes.
Yep.
And what it has taught me though is that she is really like, she's going to either run a company or a gang one day. Like she is amazing and she is a natural leader. And if we just forced compliance, we would destroy her.
Yes.
And that has been really hard to learn. And there are some days I think it's going to kill me. But what we have found that talking to her and maybe guiding her, but not necessarily forcing it, makes a huge difference. Huge difference.
One of my siblings, and I'm not going to reveal genders or identities to protect, because they sometimes watch my channel, but one of my siblings, my parents took a completely different approach when addressing behavior. And that approach was long conversations and logicking through things and letting them ask questions. And I mean, 2+ hours sometimes talking about one thing in private so that they could really like try to think through. And there's lots of struggles because they're saying like I'm still frustrated, and it's like, okay, that's fine, you can be frustrated. And and it I mean, I don't know how many hours, countless hours of as they're growing up and figuring out who they are. And I'm sorry, man, darn it.
Oh,
But they are just very intelligent, inquisitive, and empathetic, and lots of great things. And because they didn't squash his I did it again. I have two, so it's fine. But they didn't squash their curiosity or whatever. But it's like the not molding it, but keep putting the guide rails on a little bit to protect them from doing something they regretted, for sure.
Well, and I definitely see too, I have a lot of friends that their parents had very strict forced compliance growing up, and they lost their minds as soon as they graduated, and
Yep.
they didn't know how to navigate the world, and they made all the mistakes, they did all the things, and then started regretting it. And
Yeah.
I was laughing because I was like, oh my gosh, I did that. Like, I totally my rebellious phase. My rebellious phase was going to the tattoo parlor and sitting in the chair and then going, ooh, no. And I think I drank 3 times. Like, my rebellious phase was not rebellious. And my daughter just barely, she was like, well, you guys thought I was compliant, but I wasn't. And I was like, what didn't you comply with? She said, oh, I would sneak food into my bedroom all the time. Like, that's the act of rebellion. Yes, I'm winning.
Yeah.
But I think if you just force compliance and you don't have the discussions about it, that's where the problems come in, because they may think you're just ridiculous and they're frustrated, and then they do the opposite, and they may find out why you said what you said and why you had those rules.
Yeah.
How much pain could you maybe have avoided if you had the discussions?
For sure. Jen says, as someone who was an obedient child who still got yelled at all the time, I feel the fact I still always got in trouble molded me into becoming very complacent. But as a young adult, I feel after hearing this, my obedience may have just been a form of OCD.
Yeah. Being worried that you're never going to be good enough for your parents.
It's rough. Yeah.
It is. It's hard. And it, like I said, my 16-year-old, we were like, oh my gosh, you're amazing. The fact that you drop everything to go and help this person, even though they really should not have dropped those things because they had to get them done, they would often give up things that they needed to do or wanted to do to be, the best you could be.
Yeah. And I think one of the benefits of like talking through stuff with your kids, or like even my parents would spend extended periods of time talking with me through things. And I still feel like I wish I would have had more conversations or been able to understand that I should have asked more questions. But that manifested itself in MLM a little bit because of just accept it, don't ask questions. And there were some things where people tap out pretty early on in that conversation when you do have questions, because it's always like, well, what's wrong with what I'm doing? What's wrong with the compensation plan? What's wrong with the recruiting? It's like, well, I have questions, and it's not inherently offensive to have questions. And why is it an issue to be able to answer or redirect me to something where I could find the answer?
And nor is it a personal attack.
Yeah.
Another creator, I think she said, unless your pronouns are shampoo and conditioner, this is not an attack on you. I just actually have a question about the company and or the product.
Yeah.
But people take it so personally, and it's like, no, you're not the company. Like,
yeah.
I have honest questions. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. Here's my next one. And again, we touched on this a little bit earlier, but what's your perspective on how you would maybe either change what you told your kids or your perspective now on how you would address people in authority.
Yeah. So I think that the one that the easiest for me right now is probably teachers, right? Because that's kind of the phase of life that we're in. And I was talking with my husband, and I said, did you just do whatever your teachers asked? And he was like, well, most of the time, yes. And what I would counsel my children now, and I was super proud that it got through to my daughter without even like necessarily sitting down and having that conversation about her teacher. If for some reason you don't want to do something that your teacher is asking you to do, I want you to do introspection. Why? Is it because it's like you're tired and you don't want to listen to them, or you don't want to do the assignment because you think it's stupid? You should probably do that. If you feel like in your heart and soul that this is wrong, that is a very different conversation. And that it is okay to ask questions, and that we will support you in you asking questions, but we will also expect you to do it respectfully, not being combative, because that comes across very different too. So I guess it's like respectfully disrespectful.
Yeah.
Well, why do we have to do this? Why do we have to do it this way? Why can't we not say this word because it's offensive? And that's where I think having them do the introspection first on why they don't want to do that thing,
mm-hmm.
and then respectfully ask questions, and ask questions that have to do with how you're feeling, or where your own, like, I didn't know cognitive dissonance was a thing until like recently, but you have that. And so why are you having that? And like, look at it and talk it through.
Mm-hmm. And I think, everyone has a different childhood experience. Everyone has a different parent experience. My husband and I are not parents, but I think it's also like in a self-awareness of a standard of care that you expect from others, and even if you're not quite sure what that should be, maybe have that conversation, so that even if you're not privy to all those interactions that they would have with people in authority, they at least are hearing it enough that they could say, this isn't right.
Mm-hmm.
This isn't right. And they can say like, and maybe that's a first step of self-awareness, and then be able to take action at some point, because some people aren't. I mean, some people don't. They think they make little kids make certain assumptions about what's right and what's wrong sometimes, when there's not information to fill it in, or if they can't fill it in for themselves, or they fill it in with maybe some wonky structure. So it's
interesting. So my daughter, who's my like wild card, she really wanted a drama club at her elementary school. And she's like, because she saw her older siblings have clubs in high school and whatever. She's like, well, why doesn't elementary school have clubs? And I was like, I don't know. Why don't you talk to your principal? And her principal was just absolutely not. We don't do that. And like, she felt crushed. Well, the next year there was a new principal, and I said, the last one didn't accept it, but maybe this one would.
Yeah.
So she approached her again, and she was like in third grade. She scheduled an executive meeting over lunch. She asked me to make brownies because people are nicer over chocolate.
So smart.
Homemade is better. I'm like, yes, girl.
Yes.
And she sat down with the new principal, and she explained why she felt their school deserved to have the same things that some of the older kids did. And the principal was amazing. She sat there and she listened to her, and she said, you're right. You should have some of those things. But if you want those, here are the parameters. And so I somehow ended up being over a drama club. But by telling her just because one authority figure is not going to listen to you, it doesn't mean everyone's not going to, and that you have to keep going. You have to, if it is something that is really important to you, keep going and keep pushing for it. There's some days I think she's an evil genius, and some days just straight up genius.
I think geniuses are like that though. So
right, I'm like, oh my gosh, geniuses are a little bit hard to raise.
Yes,
but just because one person tells you no, and there's someone in authority, that doesn't mean that the next person's not. And so you have to keep up what is lighting your soul on fire.
I agree. Someone left in it.
I'm definitely nice. Amen.
I think we all are, Melissa. For sure. Okay, next question. If you could go back and change one thing with your childhood or raising your kids, what would that be?
I think, and talking with my oldest, you don't know how to parent. It is so hard. It is so overwhelming, and we all make mistakes. That's what I've, told my kids. I'm sure I'm giving all of you guys therapy moments on the daily, and and that's okay. We'll save up for it, and we'll make sure you get the help you need to overcome me. But I think having those open conversations more when they were younger, I don't think we trusted them enough. They can articulate, even when they're younger, what they need. And I don't think we did that enough with our older kids. And I think once we started to, where they said, now you're loosening up more, and not being like, no, like you just can't do this.
Yeah.
I think that would be the biggest thing, is having more open conversations and all the time. And the hard part with that has been being willing to change our own mind on things. Just because we think something doesn't mean that we truly know the answer. Yeah. And our kids have a lot of wisdom. And so being able to say, you're right, okay, we're okay with that. We will accept that. But I think that is one of the benefits maybe that our younger children are getting.
Yeah. I mean, I think my younger sibling, and I think that might be the case with most parents. I'm only saying this from like a kid's perspective, because I'm the second oldest, and then I have my sister, and then there's 2 boys, and then there's a girl, and it definitely loosened up. I think to their benefit. I think you learn as you parent, and that at least seemed to be the case from like the observer, not the parent. But it was a hard. I mean, we put my parents through the ringer for sure, and we love them, and we have a great relationship now. But it's like a lot of individual personalities. Like we have our moments, like not clashing, but we obviously all like to like talk about ideas and stuff, and we're all very different. So it definitely was like, my mom was like, please stop, please stop, please stop.
Yeah, we were just topics. It's like, we just don't talk about this, like as a family.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna leave that one there. But I think, one of the things one of my brothers told me was, he has kind of 2 families, right? He got divorced and then remarried, and another, some more kids.
Yeah.
He said he was so much more calm and patient with the younger kids, because he wasn't so uptight all the time and worried about doing everything. And I think that's part of it too, is not freaking out about everything. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's tough, because I can imagine that my parents care a lot about us, and they want to do right by us, or most good parents do. I would make a caveat, because some parents are not good parents at all.
Absolutely.
And so that desire to do good by your kids, it's like, I don't want them to screw this up. So yeah. What do you think of the idea of encouraging self-discipline instead of obedience as a trajectory? Because I wanted to kind of talk about this, because it's kind of like, not to argue for the sake of arguing, but because there are some good things, like learning how to keep your house going, and like being able to go and do things on time, because there are some activities that require you to be on time, like your job or going to your studies. And like there are some things that kind of require that, like, you've got to do this. It's not a negotiable type of thing. So I didn't know like what your perspective was on that.
I would say decide what your non-negotiables are, but then realize that everything else then is negotiable, and be willing to do that. Because and I like what you said earlier about having guardrails. Here are the rules, and you can operate anywhere within those.
Yeah.
and make decisions, because if not, you don't know how to make them.
Yeah.
If someone tells you what to do all the time,
Mm.
then how are you going to make decisions?
Yeah. You lose that ability to like problem solve,
Yeah.
and which is a big deal. And again, it's like, wow, I don't know why. Like, and again, back to MLMs, it's and I would say like I can process through some things like really well, but then it's like this is manipulative, or they're doing that. My upline's doing this, or my upline's doing this, and it's like, okay, I don't. It's just one of those things where it's like I know like the way I am as a person, and not resolving those when I was younger is making more work on the back end.
Yeah.
The back end now, for sure. For
Yeah.
sure.
And I think too, just helping them problem solve, because but also realize that there are some things that you may just have to be obedient to, like a
Yes.
work schedule.
Yeah.
Like there, and I think I have kind of a different perspective of it too. So
Yeah.
before I started staying home with my kids, I did not start staying home until I had my fourth. So
Okay.
before that, I worked and I was a human resources manager. I ran a call center.
Oh, cool.
I'm telling you right now, running a call center is easier than raising 5 kids. But as I told my husband, I'm like, I could fire people there. Here, the kids come back every day. They are here.
Yeah.
And so I definitely got a lot of that with human resources. Like there are policies that you have to follow. I
Right.
don't care. Like if you want to drink at work, you can't.
Right.
It just is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think, which is probably why it worked really well for me being such a rule follower. I'm like, I like having a policies and procedures manual. I like knowing what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And it's interesting then when you kind of flip it and you tell the employees, okay, you have unlimited sick time, you manage it.
Mm.
Okay, well, you're going to get the people like me who feel guilty taking a day.
Yeah.
And then you're going to get the other people who are like, woohoo, 3 weeks vacation,
Yep.
you're going to tell them sick.
Yeah.
And I think that's where the guardrails and making sure that you have people that like, okay, you don't have to be obedient, but you need to discipline yourself in
Right.
here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm reading my question to make sure I shouldn't skip it. Okay, so here's a question let me try to fix it real quick. I guess this was an assumption. I wanted to get your perspective because again, I'm not a parent, but it's jumping off from the self-discipline question again. But I made this distinction because as a people pleaser, rule follower, I love like doing the right thing and getting approval. And again, that's being in an MLM when you're doing all of the Zoom calls and you're doing all of the activities, the income earning activities, and you're reaching out and you're doing all the stuff. It's like, wow, you're doing so good, and you're like, great. It's I don't I get the distinction I would say is not looking for that validation in a person, like knowing what good choices are, and then not placing your what is it, not placing the value of the decision on someone's approval. Like again, like what you were saying earlier about knowing what your value set is internally, knowing what the proper standard of care is, and it not based on when it starts being based on an authority figure or someone's approval, all the stuff starts falling apart, in my opinion. So what do you think after I spew
Yeah.
that?
No, I think absolutely, because and it's still something, and I think it's something within all of us that it's nice to have that good job. It's nice to have that, attaboy. And I'm thinking particularly of me within MLM. Nobody told me during the day that ooh, you changed the diapers best of anyone.
Right.
I didn't get that. I got zero approval from anyone. And that was really hard. So then when I went into MLM and people were like, oh my gosh, you're crushing it. It felt so good. And then I wanted to continue to do that.
Yep.
Even though I had in my mind, like, should I really be doing this? Like,
Mm-hmm.
this feels weird, but they're telling me that it's what I need to do, and they obviously know, so I'm going to
Yeah.
do it.
Right.
But at some point, and I think this is true for most, at some point it becomes like, no, like you've stepped across a line that I'm not willing to step across.
Yeah.
And for me, that was not being truthful about the food plans we were following, because I was in a particular company that did not do keto, but I was in a keto group with all of the top coaches, and we were all eating keto, and they were attributing their results to the company's programs. And I knew dang well that's not what was happening. And so then they were like, Aimee, why aren't you posting on yours? I'm like, because I don't feel comfortable lying.
Yeah.
So I just kind of stepped back from even posting anything, because I was like, I can't do that.
Yeah, and because one of those behaviors bumped up into one of your core values, and then you start to say like, oh, okay, it's like, crap. I mean, one of the girls I grew up with had a mommy makeover, which that's fine. The issue I took is when she got into Aimee Ure and attributed all of her new body to the trim that she was drinking, when she just got a very intensive and expensive mommy makeover, and where there was no note of that surgery, all of those surgeries. And she said, buy this bottle, here's my before and after. That's disingenuous, and it's lying. It's lying to make money.
Oh yeah. So my like final straw was I guess, and this is how horrible MLMs are. I think she was my great grandma or whatever coach. So she posted
I don't know how to respond to that.
Okay, that's hilarious. I don't know how to respond to that. She posted a before and after, and her before was actually her current, and her after was 5 years earlier when she was in a bikini comp.
What?
And I was like, do you think the people following you are stupid? Because you're not a bikini competitor, and anyone looking at you would know that's not right. Like,
right.
But the fact that I could see, and she was a previous top 10 coach. So it was like, okay, so you're telling me that to get to the top, I have to do this? I'm out. I won't do it.
Yeah. And maybe anyone in the chat, I don't know if you've experienced any of these moments. If you've ever been in an MLM, if you want to drop them, we can post them on the screen. But it is that difference in like, and the crazy thing is, a lot of the independent contract agreements within companies have a certain standard of behavior that you're supposed to live up to. And then we see a completely different thing being carried out by those independent contractors. And it's like, okay, well, obviously there's an issue. And the company with the most vested interest in correcting this would be the company. But that doesn't seem to be happening from what I can tell. It happens sporadically.
Very, very sporadically. And from what I've seen, it's the lower level reps that are the ones that are they're terminated or whatever. Yeah. Because they're not the ones pulling in the most money. I mean, there are some of the very top of various MLMs that it's like they have your name all over them and they're doing this and you're okay with it because they're making you money.
Yeah.
It's nuts. It's nuts.
Yeah, it's discouraging too, because it's like in 2022, it seems like there is an open there's like an open market, or there's a welcoming market for companies who have integrity and say, this is what we're about, and we're about this at any cost. And you could make us $1 million or plus, and if you're not holding what we find valuable in our code of ethics or whatever they have listed, then you're not going to be doing that with our name attached. And I don't see that across the board with the MLMs that I've looked at. And it's really discouraging. And I'm sure it's discouraging to the median and the lower levels of the compensation structure, because they're saying,
like, you get to a certain level and you can see behind the curtain, but you're not really behind the curtain yet. You're watching things and you're like, whoa, hold on.
Yeah.
But then you're watching them get away with it too.
Mm-hmm.
That's the
Yep.
hardest part.
Yeah. So Melissa said, my moment was in Mary Kay when my director vanished and our senior director told us on her team not to contact her. Nope, that's some cult shit. Bye. Yeah. And so in similar experience, Melissa, I was a Mary Kay back in the day, and my I talked a little bit about this on Aaron B's podcast, but she broke a record with how fast she went from initial consultant to director and qualification to director. And she was doing enough volume that she surpassed like the first 2 car levels in the company. And so by the time we were going to seminar in July, she voice messaged all of us and told us that she had left the company. And we were fed this line by the director above her that, oh, she refused to get an assistant. She, wouldn't do what she needed to make this work and all this other stuff. And I should have said, that doesn't really sound like her. And instead, I thought, person in authority wouldn't be lying because I don't lie to people. Or I try very hard not to lie. And if I do, I make corrections. And I should have gone and saying, not everyone is like me, or not everyone is like good people I've come into contact with. And does this story make sense? And what is being concealed?
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, we're not going to trash people just because they're not in the room and they can't defend themselves. Like, what is the truth? And that was the beginning of the end for me, for sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you have any questions or any thoughts, Aimee? I feel like,
yeah, to me, because I also, this is something that we talked with our kids about, is as a parent, you oftentimes, and if anyone feels this way, you can comment in the chat so I don't think I'm crazy. There are many times that I feel like we are damned if we do and we are damned if we don't. Like, there's not, no matter what decision we make, there's going to be a problem. And so we have to make a decision on what that problem is. And so when I asked my 16-year-old, we have very strict guidelines around cell phones, social media, access. It just so happens that my husband works in cybersecurity. Yeah. And so I'm like, sorry, you came to the wrong family for this one. My dad is pretty strict on it, and
right.
for reasons. And
yes.
So yesterday, my 16-year-old said, I think when you guys said that the reason I didn't have access to some things is you trusted me, but you didn't trust other people, that's a bunch of bullshit. And I was like, wow.
Okay.
And I said, I can see how you would feel that and see that. Let me explain to you our reasoning. And our reasoning is that your brain doesn't become fully developed until you're in your mid-20s. And if there is someone out there who is in their 40s or 50s, they can very easily manipulate you into a very dangerous situation.
Yeah.
And I would rather err on the side of caution than to have you go through a horrific experience. Should we do it? I don't know. Maybe we were too strict on it. But I would rather be too strict than too lenient on some things.
Yeah.
But I think that goes back to what we talked about. Like, you have to have your non-negotiables. And for us, those are some of our non-negotiables.
Yeah.
Because we have seen, like, personally, kids that have gotten catfished or different things and who have tried to commit suicide because of various things. And it's like, you know what? I'd rather be more careful. Yeah. Because there are so many scary things now that weren't there. So I understand why you may think it's BS. I think if you choose to have children later, you may get a different perspective.
Yeah. And I know this, I do know there were some things, obviously, when I was in my teens, and even that I didn't, even as a compliant kid, there were some things I was like, I don't understand why you are doing this. And now being well into my 30s, I I would say like, oh my gosh, like I am just lucky that I am still I'm still like in a relatively healthy mindset and
Yeah.
physically like good, and there's just some perspective that comes with age. And I am not in the cyber field. I'm in the digital marketing side. I've been in there for the past 12 years, but like understanding SEO and PPC and like how traffic works on the internet and everything, and uh, mostly looking at like the viewers of what they're watching. When you look deep into that information, it is scary to see what content is being exploited on the internet and who's targeted. So while you may not be able to grasp it at 16 or 20 or 25 because you're not aware of that information, that doesn't mean the information is not there just because you can't see it, and doesn't mean that, you know, the bad
I think,
people aren't doing bad crap. So
yeah, I think the one that kind of pushed my husband over the edge. So he said, do you know what the number one app for predators was? And this was probably back in the day. It was Uno,
oh my gosh.
because that's what kids play.
Yep.
And they're not anticipating, they're thinking they are talking to a 10-year-old or a 12-year-old.
Yep.
They're not anticipating this. And it just is, it's so hard to accurately explain that without, one, freaking your kids completely out.
Yeah.
But two, like, it's hard to believe that people would do that. It's hard to believe that is the truth, until you know someone that has that happen. And then it's like, oh my gosh, that they get mad. They're like, why don't we get to play on Roblox? Roblox has a lot of really bad things that occur. So I mean, it's not something you have to do. So instead we find other things that we feel comfortable with. And it's like, I'm sorry that your friend's parents will let them do this. We're not responsible for them. We're responsible for you. So
yeah, and the unfortunate thing is these vehicles get overtaken by bad people with bad intentions, and it isn't fair because the games are fun, or and it's like that balance of you weigh maintaining innocence and protecting, or letting, sacrificing innocence in terms of, okay, we're going to share some information. So, but again, at what age do you do that? It is a tough, because we, anyways, I'll DM you with what happened, but it was just not, just because something hasn't happened to you doesn't mean that stuff does not happen. And again, like in the MLM, the whole, and this is a side note because I know not everyone feels this way, but exploiting your kids online is just for personal profit. It's because I've seen the back end information of so many like of YouTube families and the type of people who watch the content. It's just crazy. And again, just for the basic non-crazy thing, but using your kids to sell a product or to make you more relatable or to help people overcome the ickiness factor of MLM, I don't know. It is hard to overcome.
It is. And for us, when I was in MLM, I probably shared a lot more than I should have with my kids, because it's just what you did.
Yeah. You're taught to do that.
Absolutely.
You're taught to do that.
And now, like I had told my 16-year-old that, people had some questions. They wanted to, there are a lot of people who have wanted us to do a video with our kids explaining how me being in my MLM impacted my children. And my 16-year-old said, I will do it, but I don't want to be on camera.
Yeah.
And I was like, respect. Like they can hear your voice. That's totally fine. But I feel as if there are a lot of people who don't give their kids that courtesy. And you can see it on some of them. They just shove a camera in their face and you can tell how uncomfortable the kids are. And it's like, why force them to do that? They don't want to.
Yeah. And then the argument is, oh, well, I asked his permission. Well, do they understand at 8 years old about informed consent or the long-term impacts that they might not want being an adult, having a lot of their childhood online? Do they understand that? Or and I feel like in a home, there's a certain level of kids understanding that what they choose to do makes them safer or makes them less safe in their home environment. So are they going to feel truly comfortable? I hope so. I hope they would feel truly comfortable in saying, hey mom, hey dad, or hey mom, or hey dad, like what, I don't want to do this, and having no repercussions from that. But as a little kid, are they going to be able to weigh that and understand that? Gosh, I don't know.
Well,
I don't think so.
It goes back to that whole being obedient or compliant. Like, well, you're telling me to do this, so I'm going to do this.
Yep.
Even though, like, in my heart, I may not want to, or I may not think it's right. There's a specific Beachbody coach I can think of that, like, her 3-year-old is everywhere. They get millions upon millions of views, and the amount of money that they make off of this 3-year-old, like, that it's not okay. What is she going to think one day when she grows up? And, or is she going to go off the deep end because her entire life has been monopolized? And
and who's watching that content? I'm going to be very vague about this because I don't want to trigger anyone, but I'm sure your husband knows. When you can look at the back end analytics on some of these videos, you would be mind blown by the metrics and the actual like genders of the people watching the content.
Yeah.
And that's all I'm going to say.
It's not who you think. It's not other young moms who are like, oh, look at how cute my kid is. That's not who's watching these videos.
Yeah. And it's a conversation that, gets a lot of pushback on here because it's like, oh, well, you're just twisting everything. No, it's the reality. Numbers don't lie. You can't fake user data like that when you're looking at the back end stuff. And you're maybe and here's a question that kind of plays into that. So Sarah asks, and I would love for you and your husband, Aimee, to do a video on internet safety with children. I worked with trafficking survivors, so much of the time parents are unaware of the dangers of technology and kids.
Yeah, one thing on this, oftentimes we are not our kids' favorite people.
Yep.
They get pretty dang annoyed, and I'm okay with it. I would rather them be annoyed and safe.
Yeah.
They call it our doomsday device. We have a doomsday device that tells us everything that they do. And I'm here for it. Like, and at different times, they do get different privileges. But we are very prescriptive, I guess, on how we do that. We require this. I don't know if this is going to make us sound horrible. We require basically a research paper on the dangers of social media before they can get social media. And they have to use like 5 resources. They have to give us some facts because, again, you cannot argue with facts. They just are. And we want them to go in with their eyes open a little bit. And so, our 12-year-old did a full research paper and presentation to us. And I don't know if we may have made them revise it. We may have been like, well, I don't know if you got quite enough information in there because there were like specific things that we were looking for.
Yeah.
And then it was like, okay, now we can start opening things, but it's not just going to be the floodgates. And there are still some things that you're just not going to have. We just don't have. And that's okay. And so I think that's the other hard part is you just have to be willing to, we can be the bad guy, I'm okay with it. My job is not to be their friend. It's to be their parent.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yep,
I'll check with my husband because I'm sure he would love to do something like that. He's very passionate about that. Especially seeing, like, I can't even imagine Sarah working with trafficking survivors. It would be heartbreaking. It would agree. And I can't even fathom being the parent saying, if I had just known, I wish I
Yeah.
had known. But it's the same thing. Parents, you're not all knowing. You don't give birth and all of a sudden you know everything.
Yeah.
And parents want to trust too. We have some of the same issues like we talked about. And that's why, like, I was so susceptible in my MLM. As a grown woman, I was still susceptible. I still
Yeah.
had some of the same insecurities and hangups.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that's where I do think knowledge is power.
Yeah. And you said something earlier that facts are just facts. And I think that applies for MLM too. Like, facts aren't either good or bad. You can't argue with some of these numbers that are coming out about this. You can't argue with your own income disclosure statement. You can't argue with the metadata behind the YouTube viewers on stuff. You can't argue with a lot of these things. And it's like, it's informative so you can make a more empowered decision. It's
Yeah.
not forcing you to make a decision. It's making you aware. And if you're uncomfortable in that awareness, that maybe you'd want to self-reflect a little bit, but your uncomfortableness doesn't change the fact. And so, I think that's a great thing about it. And for a lot of people, that's really uncomfortable because maybe they haven't resolved those facts within themselves.
Because some of the facts aren't fun, and they're not like. And you know what? You may have to reevaluate what you do as a parent as well. And you may have to evaluate your own relationship with some things. And it's like, wait, I didn't realize this was bad. Maybe I shouldn't be doing it either.
Yeah.
And it's hard. Yeah.
But again, the sign of intelligence is making a different decision based off of new data. So, and it doesn't mean that it's bad if you've been doing one thing for your whole life basically, and then you're presented with new data and you're able to pivot and make a different decision, based on your value set or even just whatever it is. So I don't think it's not a situation where you're stuck with your decision. It's not, I'm not stuck in an MLM. I can always change. I'm not stuck or whatever. And you don't have to be stuck either, or you can stay in your MLM, but at least be empowered, at least have that information. At least, again, me being self-aware and knowing like I am so compliant, I need to know the ditch so that I can be more empowered to not be able to be manipulated in future decisions. And then you learn and you move forward.
Yeah. And sometimes it may be, I know one of my biggest fears with leaving was that I was going to lose friendships and I was going to get bullied for leaving. I did both of those things. Oh, hey, Sonic Fights MLMs is on. I did get bullied.
Yep.
Very brutally on my own Facebook page. And do you know what? I survived it. And do you know what? I ended up having the best experience ever because I saw that even though I may have been MLM, I did try to do it with integrity, because the number of people who just lost it on my upline after the comment that she made was amazing. And it was like, okay, no, I did do this with integrity. These guys do know my heart. They do know that I have been truthful. And it's like sometimes the thing that you think is going to be the worst thing with leaving ends up being the best.
Yeah. And I just recently left Young Living, and I don't know if anyone's aware of like the scandal that happened back in February with the book and people getting upset. Well, I don't know if y'all saw the screenshot of one of the people still in Young Living who left a comment on the girl who had the issue and said, "You're a disgrace to network marketing." That is my 1, 2, 3, 4. That's 4 uplines up from me. And so that started do I want to be associated with an organization where someone who's leading the organization is treating other people like that? So that started that. I'm confused. And so then I kind of went down and I processed through, and I went to my own direct upline and the girl who recruited me, and they were censoring. One of the girls was censoring information, and they said, "You don't need to know about this. It's just a waste of time. The person who's talking about this is in another network marketing company, and she's just trying to recruit people." And I said, "Absolutely not." I mean, she might be looking at this as an opportunity, but I can imagine that if you are a Christian, it would be against maybe your theology to you as a person speak something that you allocate to a higher power. I can imagine that would be upsetting. I could imagine that seeing the foreword written by Mary Young would be upsetting because the book was not printed by Young Living, and I can imagine all of these things.
Mhm.
And so I told the girl what was happening, because the girl who was refusing to give the information had been speaking for 2 years about being against censorship. And so that difference in behavior was like, okay, I need to take some time and think, because I don't want to. There's lots of red flags at this point. And Young Living came out with, I don't know if they are, but it's a whole cluster. Their PR team dropped the ball, in my opinion. And I'm no longer a brand partner, so I can say that. But
Yeah.
anyways, so I told him, I said, hey, I'm going to step away. I don't want to put you in a bad spot. So find someone to take over my line and I'll sell it to them so that you don't lose your paycheck. And they said, oh, why didn't you join any of the Zoom calls so we could have answered your questions? Blah, 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 blah. And I said, you're not Young Living Corporate. You can't change policy and how you treat these situations that come up. You can't change how the business is run or anything. And I took a month to think about this. I've answered my own questions. I've done my own research. Your behavior is one of the parts that is causing me to leave. But overall, it's Young Living. It's what they did and said, oh, it didn't come from us. And there was too many unanswered questions. So it was just, and then it's like, no one really has talked to me since. So again, it's like Ghost City. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. That's fine. It just is. It is what it is, and it's very painful to leave a community that you thought that you were a part of, and to kind of be like, in a way, like a little desert of like, there's no one here except the anti MLM community, I guess. So,
well, and I mean, I've told my kids, I'm like, the mean kids at school right now grow into mean adults who, like, you're never going to be done with it. You're going to continue to experience the same things, and sometimes on a much larger scale and a much more painful scale. And it's the ghosting. Like, it's one of the things that makes it so hard to leave an MLM, is because you get so entrenched in the community. You have to be willing to lose all of that.
Yeah.
Because the second you quit, everyone's going to be told not to talk to you.
Yeah, because you've become the person that they've warned them against the whole career you've been in the MLM. Those are those negative people who are going to tell you that you're in an MLM and that you shouldn't be. And that's not the case. Like, I'm still friends with some people who are in MLM, and I am not really looking to sell you on the opportunity to leave. I'm just trying to show you that, hey, there's some discrepancies, and and we don't even have to talk about them. But like, I'm just friends with people who are not religious or religious. I'm friends with people who vote the same way I do and who don't. More people who don't vote the same way that I do. I like having a dynamic group of people. I don't want to be in a Thunderdome, and I'm not interested in clones. I'm not interested in like hoarding a little group of people together who are exactly like me. I like learning from other people. I like a dynamic, friend set. And so I don't know. It's just interesting what potentially they're being told about, people who leave. And it's like, gosh, I can't worry about it because it's not my problem anymore. But
yeah, and at the end of the day, and I think, to bring it kind of back to the obedience thing, at the end of the day, you have to decide that your values are more important than being obedient and just following the rules. That you have to be willing to say, no, I'm not going to do it. And I'm not going to feel that way. And I'm not going, like, I don't have to be okay with this.
Yeah.
Because there were oftentimes they would try to get you to be, just be positive. Just be positive.
Yeah.
And, and oh my gosh, I hope your friend will leave eventually too, because their Beachbody's on my they're so problematic. And I know it's probably because it's the one I came from. It's actually, it's not the last MLM I was in. I left Beachbody and went to Prove It.
Oh my God. Oh boy, two winners right in a row.
It was funny. I had enough cognitive dissonance from Beachbody to be like,
wait a second.
Wait
a second.
I made a lot more money in Prove It than I did body. But it's, knowing that I don't have to just listen to what they say, and I can ask questions, and there are other people who also have been asking questions.
Yeah.
But the other hard part is you have to be ready. They have to be ready, because it's hard.
Yeah. And I was talking with my dad on, we went live a few days ago, and he was talking about, because sometimes it's hard to have a loved one or a friend or a spouse still in a multi-level marketing company when you are not, or you're not supporting it. And it put a huge stress on our marriage when I was still in. And so it's like, what are those compassionate questions you can ask that don't have an ulterior motive? Because, again, you can be friends with people who are in multi-level marketing. You absolutely can. And you can also not sacrifice your value set to be friends with them. Like, you don't have to accept everything they say. And what, it's just, and I don't know, I'm a little bit rambling, but it's just, I don't know. Again, it is asking those questions. It is bringing actual like facts, or even asking questions about like, so like, it looks like you're working really hard. How much are you making? And is the amount of money you're making like what you thought you were going to be
Or
making?
have you done a profit and loss statement?
Yes.
I mean, but there are things that, in my opinion, part of what I need to do is that I need to be a safe space as well. Like, so I didn't unfriend everybody because they're in an MLM. Like, I live in MLM heaven. Okay. Like, I have pretty much any MLM you can name. I know someone in it. And it just is what it is. They have to know that I have love and compassion and kindness, and that I'll shoot straight with them, and I'll give them facts.
Yeah.
And it will be that, no, I no longer am going to purchase that. But if that's what you choose to do, shine on. You do your thing. But you just have to have that mutual respect.
Yeah.
Because otherwise they're never going to come and ask you questions. They're not going to feel like they can get out. And you have a lot of valuable information on this side that you want them to know.
Yeah, you just want people to have access to it. And the censoring that happens, and preventing people from kind of going out and finding more info, it kind of is, I don't know, it happens a lot in multi-level marketing. Anastasia, this is for Aimee. That's how I found you, Aimee, when I saw that she had joined just a few months ago. Michelle told me that you talk about Beachbody, and not many other anti-MLMers talk about Beachbody specifically.
It's so funny. Every time I'm like, I'm gonna start talking about other people, I can't, like, the stuff. And honestly, I now have been blocked by most of the top coaches.
Yeah.
And so I'm not seeking these things. They're sent to me.
Yep.
Like, I'm being sent these things. And I think exposing, like we kind of talked about, behind the curtain, to be like, no, this is what happens on training calls. Like,
yeah,
you may want to think about this. And this is what happens on some of the top training calls, not just like when they're still trying to indoctrinate you and get you excited.
Yeah.
But when you get into the nitty gritty stuff, it's like, oh, gall. Okay, this is what happens.
Yeah, Dave, he gets around on the chats, and he's so amazing. And I was having like not a meltdown in one of the Discords, but I was like, it's so hard. I'm having such a bad day, like processing through leaving my community. And Dave was like, go watch this video from Aimee. It's amazing. And I went and watched it, and so many, even though we were in different MLMs, so many points that you brought up really hit home and really articulated what I was going through, and like, that it was going to be okay, basically. And it was so like, there you can gain stuff from people even if you're not in the same MLM.
Was it the one where was I sobbing?
I don't know. I'm not sure, but it was just like, I feel like you have such thoughtful commentary on things, and you're able to articulate it. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is exactly what I needed. And Dave's good about that. He'll like, this, I have the perfect video for you. And that's how I found you originally.
Yeah, I had like my meltdown one day. I just couldn't do it anymore. And I had just gone to a doctor's appointment and found out, like, how much physical damage I'd actually done.
Yeah.
And like I just felt like I needed to record a video, and I didn't know necessarily if I was even going to post it.
Yeah.
And I came home and I asked my daughter, my oldest, to watch it, and she watched it and she was just crying, and she's like, Mom, you have to post this. Like, this is so powerful and people need to hear these things. Like, this is
Yeah.
important. And I showed my husband, and my husband got up and left. And I was like, what happened? He's like, I've got to take this kid to this thing. I was like I'm hurt. And he's like, I couldn't tell you in that moment what I felt, because my feelings were so strong.
Yeah.
Because I lived that with you and I saw those things. And you know, and it's probably what your husband, like, they want you to wake up so bad.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
and so they see those things,
Yeah.
and it's heartbreaking for them too.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's still very painful because he was so supportive. He had some thoughtful like feedback while I was still in, but it's very painful. Like, it's uncomfortable because he's told me like it's painful to relive this somewhat as you are making these videos, because it was a painful, like there were painful speed bumps in our marriage for sure. And I feel bad. I feel very somber about that for sure.
Yeah, it's my husband and I just did a video together, actually.
I just watched it. I love y'all two together. I would be like, I hope y'all do so many more videos together, because like y'all's energy and like just and I guess I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I just feel so passionately about you guys. Like, I stan y'all so much as a couple. But I was watching him like as he's watching you talk, and just the respect and like that it feels, I don't know, it from the screen I was like, wow, he cares about her so much. And like, you don't get that a lot when you watch partners talk to their their partner or their spouse. And it was like, wow, this is incredible, they're so cute and amazing, and they're both articulate, and like I would love to watch a million videos by them. So go ahead, I didn't mean to
Well,
interrupt you. So
he was funny because before the video he's like, okay, wait, what are we talking about? And I said, you know, I started doing these Manipulation Monday videos, and so I had people send me things about how like they had been manipulated, and I want to know if I was manipulated those same ways. And he said, or if you did the manipulation those same ways. And I was like, this is going to be rough. I don't want to talk about that, but we did.
yeah.
Like, I mean, it is what it is. And
Yeah.
and I feel for the spouses.
Yeah.
There's some of the spouses that are jacks and just ride the coattails, but a lot of our spouses really want what's best for us, and they can't get us to see it for a while.
Yeah. But I mean, I love y'all together, and I think a lot of people loved y'all together. And even if it's just for a short, I don't know, like him responding to, I don't know, like manipulation on a quick reel or something, I would be like, I would love to have both of y'all on something.
I did.
sometime.
I told him, I was like, there's some videos where they do it with the spouses, and it'd be super funny for him and I to do like a reaction to them.
Yes.
Do you want me to tell you a secret though about him?
Yes.
He's Santa Claus.
What? Oh my god.
It's true.
Oh my gosh.
I will have to send you pictures, because if you guys saw, like, he's a pretty big guy, big beard. We bleach him completely white, and he is the best.
What?
He's
Oh
the
my
best
gosh.
ever.
That's amazing. That is amazing.
We could do some pretty cool reaction videos in December.
Oh yeah, Santa Claus hates multi-level marketing. That would be incredible, especially like a Christmas series. Oh my, I would love that. I would love that. I would love that.
Yeah,
But
we'll do full Santa. We'll do a full Santa
yes,
reaction video.
yeah, that would be awesome. Well, I really enjoyed talking to you. I think
You too.
I think it's an interest. I don't know. I feel like this might be like a little sliver of the conversation, but it's just talking about it, I feel like helps other people. And I think other people, I mean, just having the knowledge out there and in a conversation format, I feel like other people can learn too. MLM reps will get Cole for Christmas. That would be so cool on a reel though, if your husband was dressed up as Santa Claus and he'd be like, no, you're getting Cole.
Okay,
you're getting Cole.
Should we do a true confession? Do you guys do you have, I don't know, do you ever do the Am I the Asshole Reddit thread?
No, I need to go look at it right now.
Okay. So people give situations and then they ask like, am I the jerk or are they the jerk? And then people answer it. Okay.
Oh, wow.
This is my when I was, because I totally made him do a picture as Santa with hammer and chisel from Beachbody.
Oh my god. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Okay. This is so much. There's so much goodness in your story, and oh my god. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
we all have those. We all have those, except yours sound way more interesting than mine do. So
Yeah, I have a lot of making up to do for that one because I'm like, oh my, it came up on my feed on my Facebook stories, and I was like, oh, I used Santa to sell Beachbody. Oh man.
yeah.
And again, though, I think it's crazy the things that seem totally normal. Yeah.
Yep. And then now it's perspective stepped away. You're like, what the heck was I thinking? I've had lots of those for sure. Well, this has been a great conversation. I've had a lot of fun. I really appreciate all the thoughtful questions that were submitted during the live stream. And both of these, it'll be posted to Amy's channel and it'll be posted to my channel. While you're still on, if you could do the YouTube things and like Amy's video, give her a follow if you're not already subscribed. And if you like our content and would like to come back again, we would love that feedback from you guys. So thank you so much and have a good rest of your Friday. Is it Friday? Yeah, it's Friday.
I think so.
Oh my gosh. I hope so. I hope it's Friday. If it's not, please insert the correct day of the week. All right. Bye everyone.
Bye.